Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for the event where we introduce the film Timeless Soviet Classic, Irony of Fate, or Enjoy the Bath. And we are offering this film in conjunction with the exhibition Everyday Soviet, Soviet Industrial Design and Nonconformist Art, that is still on view at the Zimmerli Art Museum and was extended through May 2021. Unfortunately, the museum is closed for the quarantine, but hopefully if the vaccine works and we will open in the spring, I will encourage you to visit the museum and see the exhibition. And but today I would like to welcome you to a holiday event that is the holiday classic film, and Merry Christmas to everyone. And for the introduction, we have two very special guests. This exhibition was co-curated with Moscow Design Museum, and Alexandra Sankova is the director of Moscow Design Museum and my co-curator for this exhibition. And the other special guest today is Thymen Kouwenaar, who is political counselor at the Dutch Embassy in Moscow and who has many experiences with visits to Russia. And we are looking forward for him to sharing his impression about Soviet life. And before we begin to discuss the film and to give you an introduction to it, I will give you a very brief walk through the exhibition that we put together with Sasha, just to give you the idea of how the show looks like and how the film relates to the show. I'm going to share my screen. So this is the entrance to the exhibition, and by the entrance we have this wonderful work. This is called Project to Construct Glasses for Every Soviet Person, and that really relates, you know, on one hand, the view of the Soviet people into life through the red stars, as if red pink colored glasses. There is this connotation, and also the very crude execution of the object, which relates to the crude and rustic quality of Soviet industrial production and material environment. And the beginning of the exhibit, and Sasha, if you would like to comment, please do so also. The beginning of the exhibition is the very important event in the Soviet history of design and art. It's an American exhibition from 1959 in Moscow Park Sokolniki, where America showed to the Soviet people American way of life. And it was during this show that the famous kitchen debates between Khrushchev and Nixon took place. And Khrushchev was boasting about Soviet space program, while Nixon was boasting about comfort of every American housewife. And however funny this debate were, they absolutely showed the necessity to develop material environment and design environment for the Soviet people, because while Americans were able to show their latest kitchen equipment, many people in the Soviet Union still lived in barracks, and you see here the work of Oscar Rabin, and cooked on premises, as seen here in the work by Mikhail Roginsky. And so the next year in the Soviet Union, the Institute for Technical Aesthetic was established, and technical aesthetic was a euphemism word for design, because a design word was very bourgeois to be used in the Soviet Union. And this institute really produced foremost, a very avant-garde and advanced design, which took prizes on many international exhibitions. And the second gallery of our show is devoted to the stories about this design achievement of the
and the whole design system in the Soviet Union, because it started a design system in 1960 when the ministry, every ministry had a special design bureau or a research institute that was developing the whole design industry of the sector. So from 1960s, it was the major development started of design that was supervised, and that was also initiated by the government. It was not by the free market as it was in America, or because of the competition. It was because the government decided that they should invent and they should develop design.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So everything in the Soviet Union was controlled and controlled by the government, produced by the government, established by the government, etc. There was pretty much no other institution that had such power. And so, but nevertheless, this institute was quite an advanced enterprise that produced advanced things. For example, this is a funny object that I chose to show to you. This is the samovar, which is made in the shape of Sputnik from 1957, that was launched into the first Sputnik that was launched into the air. But unfortunately, all these wonderful designs that were created did not reach the consumers for the most part, because it was planned economy and everything belonged to the state, and the factories just didn't seem it profitable for themselves to change the lines of their production, and most of things were produced in a very small variety and for very long periods of time. I would say for generations. And the rest of the exhibition in the sections called Street Interiors and Things is devoted to the atmosphere in the Soviet streets, interiors, and the things that the people used. And basically shows how material environment really was. We can see here the clothing, the propaganda posters that were everywhere. This is the painting by Eric Bulatov, where we can see instead of advertisement, there were slogans and propaganda posters. And here we also see this new housing, new houses, the very standard typical houses that were built around most of cities, and that would be featured in the film. I will just scroll really quickly through the exhibition. On the right here on the slide, you see the image by Sergei Shablavin, which also features the new districts, new parts of town that were erected quite rapidly, I would say, starting from the 60s and all through the 70s and 80s. And this is the next section called Interiors. where artists used parts of Soviet interiors to make their works, and these are works by Mikhail Roginsky, which look like minimalistic works, but they have very strong social connotation, being at the same time part of the wall of floor or a floor tile. And we also reconstructed typical Soviet interior, which is seen in one of the paintings by Eric Bulatov, where we found, Sasha found the same chair or the same TV. We put program, the same news program time that this woman in the painting is watching. And pretty much the same furniture could be found in most of the apartments. And many of us remember these items, say in grandparents' apartment in our childhood, very similar one to, to each other. And the last room is called Things. And the main the main part of this room is this table in the middle with the still life of all of the most typical items of the Soviet life, tea, cookies, cookie can, tin can for tin can package for the cookies, scales, toys, cigarette packs, vacuum cleaners. That was everything was so kind of typical and also known to everyone up to the matchbox that artists really, and it became such an important kind of cultural item that artists decided to make paintings out of it. And the message of this painting conveyed all these emotional connotations that were associated with these everyday items. So such is the exhibition. And one of the main points of it was that this uniformity of the material environment in the Soviet Union really created new possibilities and different point of view and different settings that really shaped the life differently. And the film that we are going to show on the screen, Irony of Fate, is based exactly on, is an illustration of how this uniformity of things could affect everyday life. So I will stop sharing the screen now. And yes, Sasha, maybe.
Yeah, I wanted to start a discussion, and I have a question for Thymen. I know that Thymen was first in the Soviet Union in the mid-80s. And what was your first time from the European country, from the Netherlands? You arrived to USSR. What was your expression? What was your impressions? What did you feel? What did you see?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. That was actually in 85, 86, which was the first year of Gorbachev, at the beginning of very big changes in society, as we know. But at that moment, we did not know. And it's interesting, I think, or important to note that as a foreigner, everything is new, what you see. So whereas you have been speaking about uniformity and everything was dreary and the same, when you first come as a foreigner, then everything is new. So that's from my perspective. And for this perspective, from the perspective of Soviet citizens, they thought it was interesting to see a foreigner. There weren't so many at the time, especially not from the so-called capitalist countries. And in the context of this story, I think it's also very interesting that you opened with the Soviet glasses from Leonid Sokov, because if you remember, there were little stars in the glasses. So in fact, if you imagine looking through these glasses, your view would be obscured and distorted. And I think that was what is actually happening. Soviet people, most of them, that did not have any contact with the outside world, because everything was, screened off, except that what was allowed and not bad for the image of the Soviet Union internally. So, but in fact, these borders were not fully closed, but semi-open. There was always exchange, intellectual exchange in terms of thoughts, but also in style and fashion and architecture. There's always been, an interaction, even in all through the Soviet time. So coming back to your question, the first thing that I noticed, apart from that everything was more or less the same, at least in Moscow where I was allowed to be. At the same time, the style of interiors, of furniture, of which we saw a couple of pictures just now, they very much remembered what I knew of the 50s. In the 50s, I was born, the end of the 50s, but we had some furniture still, or older generations in the Netherlands had furniture which was super modern and innovative in the early 50s, and they were apparently more or less, or if not copied, they served, as an inspiration. And this Institute of Aesthetics probably took a lot of that. So they looked through these glasses, the Soviet glasses of Leonid Sokov, and they adapted it, what they saw of trends and fashions, to the reality of the Soviet Union. And that is the second observation. Most of these items are much smaller than what we have or had in the 50s in our own countries in the West, because, obviously there was less space in smaller apartments. So that was my first impression, Sasha.
And you, of course, in the Soviet Union, it was always a deficit of products, of everyday products, of food. And how did you manage with that? If it was shock for you that there were like emptiness in the stores?
Yeah, well, it's for everybody a shock. There are two aspects to it, I think. What was the reality at the time? This is what I recollect and can tell about. And how is it felt nowadays when people look back to that time? So for the first item, what was the impression on me then? I was well prepared and I had a lot of stuff with me, my baggage, because I was allowed to stay for 6 months in the country as an exchange student in chemical engineering. Which was an oddity, because such people were usually not even allowed in. But I had a lot of things with me, but day-to-day stuff, food stuff, so I couldn't take that for a long period with me. So I was, had to do with what was there. I arrived in the winter of '85, and at first there were more or less products, repetitious. So if you looked into a shop, you would see, nice tins that were sort of stapled together, but they would be repeated everywhere. Empty boxes, empty tins, which looked more or less nice, but there was very little variance. But after 2 months, or even after 1 month, suddenly this got much, much worse, and all sorts of little cheeses that had been before, they disappeared and never came back. And as from February '86, all coffee disappeared. And there were enormous lines if you wanted to buy bread. What was everywhere in the Soviet Union, also this repetitious of this, what you saw the same, the life everywhere was more or less the same. If you wanted to buy bread, there were bread shops. And this was a kind of very strange surrealistic, silent movement of feet shuffling along the shelves, where mostly there was bread. Bread was something that was, you know, a military necessity. If there was no bread, there was a danger of uncontrollable outbursts of protest. So they always had bread, although I remember 2 instances when there was no bread and people were, you know, getting really angry about that. But you shoved inside and along the shelves, and you had little you know, spoons with which to touch, not with your fingers, but with the spoons you touch all these breads to find the you know, the soft one. But everybody was doing it, and then you took it, or you said you take it. You had to pay first and then take it out, and nobody was speaking. So it was a terrible experience, really. But the most awful thing was the deficit or scarcity of meat. And if you went into a meat shop, if there was any meat at all, sometimes you had to wait really long. Then there were, you know, big chunks of what was supposed to be meat of a black color, very dry, and you said how many grams you would want, and they sort of chopped off a bit, including the bone, and the bone might actually fall on the ground. They would pick it up and put it together, and I said, I only want the meat, I don't want the bone. They said, well, we only sell it together, you shut up. You take it or you leave it, you know. And so it also says something about the service that you could find. So yeah, deficit was a real problem. And nowadays, this was the second element. If you talk about it nowadays, people have a lot of nostalgia, especially when they see the film you refer to, which shows yeah, also some good things of the old time. And you remember, you know, you can almost smell the products, you can feel what you would feel at that time when it was a bit of a fairy tale at the end of the year. You would meet with friends, etc. Then you would get this picture which is more or less positive. But if you ask, do you remember then that there was scarcity? No, they don't. And when you say the exact, you give the examples how you were waiting in line for what product and what was happening around you, then suddenly people say, oh yeah, because it's sort of put away. People try not to remember. That's an interesting observation, which I have done several times.
For Julia, for you, do you remember how it was when you were young,
Yes.
when you were a small girl, how it was in the Soviet Union?
Well, you know, I remember some what Thymen is telling about. However, you know, for me, as a child, there were certain products that were really wanted, and like, I don't know, caviar or ham, which would be distributed in special orders for the holidays. But what Thymen refers to, especially for meat, this is why in the Soviet Union, it was very important, the personal connections, because, you know, if you were friends with a butcher, you had a much better chance to have the better cuts. And I think that many people enjoyed these kinds of friendships. And actually, yes, absolutely, there were certain hardships in life, but you know, there were, I don't remember anyone in my immediate surroundings who would be really hungry. And the food was difficult to find, it's true, from what I remember, but I don't remember any shortage of it. And I also have to say that speaking about holidays in the holiday season, the celebrations were never again so emotional and so festive as they felt to me being a child in the Soviet Union. And I can very much confirm what Thymen refers to, that there was this kind of holiday magic. Sasha, what do you think?
Yeah, for me it was, I had a feeling that something is wrong. Every morning I was getting my bag with the textbooks and going in the snow. It was always dark. And with the heavy bag, I was taking the tram, then I was taking another tram, then I was going a kilometer or like a kilometer and a half till school. And everything was the same. All people were dressed up the same. All the buildings were the same. And I thought, well, I'd never actually saw something else, something different, but I felt that it shouldn't be like that. Something is wrong here, I thought. It is impossible to live like that. So I have always had this protest feeling inside me that even though, of course, I was looking TV and there were some foreign movies maybe, and my relatives, my aunt, grandmother, my aunt, they were working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and bringing some wonderful, bright clothing and, I don't know, chewing gums and stuff, different, I don't know, paints and pencils for kids, you know, like that were very different from the Soviet things. But just in general, I was thinking it shouldn't be like this. Something is wrong in the beginning. It cannot be that we all are the same. We're all different. And then when I got into when I grow up and I start to travel, and when I went to the art university, and I realized that because maybe these difficulties, these hardships and the liquidity that was then, it gave us a lot of, for artists, for designers, it gave a stimul, it gave them like extra effort to imagine how it can be different. And maybe this also was improving imagination in a way, because to survive from that, you have to dream about something else.
Thank you, Sasha. But let's talk about movie a little bit itself. And there are a couple of words of introduction to the film itself that I want to convey to our American audience. This is the cult Soviet film done by one of the major directors who actually made about a dozen of films that are absolutely classics, Soviet classics. His name is Eldar Rязанов. And this film that was released in 1976 is probably his most important and most popular classic film. And it is usually shown on December 31st, since it was released, and the entire country watches this film every year on the New Year's Eve, and never gets tired of it. So this is kind of a miracle that this film became so popular, and probably it's because of this holiday miracle when the guys is sent on a plane by a mistake instead of his friends to Leningrad from Moscow, and he gives the taxi driver his address, opens the door of the similar apartment in Leningrad with his own key, and then a young woman discovers him drunk in her apartment, and then there's the story, and they finally fall in love, etc., etc. So this film again is built on the fact that everything is similar. The houses are similar, the street names are similar, even the key matches to other people's doors. The furniture is the same, etc., etc. But what is, I think, important about this film, and I don't know, maybe Thymen might have a different opinion, but I also discussed it with a few friends, and they say that this film is very genuine. So it conveys the atmosphere, the material environment, and even the particularities of people relationship between each other quite precisely. So and in a charming way. Yes, of course, and I agree here again that it might actually, you know, it doesn't really emphasize the bad part of life, but it just genuinely gives an account of it. Pretty, I think quite honestly, but you know, without with lots of satire, tongue-in-cheek, and it reflects good and bad things that were in the Soviet Union in a very nice and charming holiday manner. Would you agree with that?
Well, if I may, I would. I find it very charming, and although the film was from 1976, I came 10 years later in the Soviet Union, so 85, 86, but actually there was very little difference. Nothing has changed in that time, which is interesting. It was really a time of stagnation. But in any case, I thought it was a real mirror. Perhaps that is why people love it so much, because they look in the mirror, they see themselves. It's not about you know, heroes of the country. It is about ordinary people and how they actually deal and work in this environment, which is everywhere the same. But at the same time, people try to be. They are individuals, so they find their individual space in it. So you feel that as well. They are all individuals. They're all different, but they are a mirror because you find such people around in your own environment. So I think that very much makes it so sympathetic, because they have all their sympathetic sides to it. And that's why I like it so much. And I do love to see it as much as I can, and so often as I can. I do make the observation, nevertheless, that all Soviet films could only be allowed if they were not negative of the Soviet image. And in terms of nostalgia and so on, if you look at this film, everything is really of relatively good quality. And the similarity is not only in the architecture of the buildings, but also in the furniture. And in this case, you can see that the people that we follow, our heroes in this film, are affluent people. They are not not exactly the median Russian citizen. They are rather affluent because they both have, by coincidence, managed through their relations, their blood you refer to, they were able to buy very scarce Polish imported furniture. And this made it extra because only a few people had that. But then it was the same. If you could have it, it was the same furniture from Poland. You could not find something from France, for instance. It was not there. And they both happened to have, well, a certain place in the elite that they were able to buy this scarce Polish furniture. And that, you know, added to the similarity, of course, but it also shows that they were affluent. And one other person, you know, who was the earlier lover of the young woman you refer to, Hippolyte, he makes a present. But what does he give? He gives real French perfume. So people were sort of anxious. There is something else. There is, if you want to give something really good, it had to be French, which was very difficult or impossible to get. So, yeah, there are many of these items. And if I have another thing, but maybe Sasha would like to comment on your issue as well on this question.
Oh, Thymen, continue. It's very interesting, your comments.
I just would like to go back. It was also about this film. I think you made the observation that production stayed the same for generations. Nothing changed. Yes. And reminds me of something which was said by the then Minister of Education from Gorbachev. And Gorbachev came to power in '85, a couple of months before I came. And then in February '86, there was this so-called 27th Party Congress in Moscow. They had that every 5 years to determine the state of the economy and how it should develop in the coming 5 years. And that was the famous historic moment that he introduced these ideas of perestroika and glasnost. And this session lasted a couple of days, and when it was ended, all the students in my chemical engineering university were summoned in the evening, late in the evening, into the Great Hall to listen to the former rector or rector of the institute. And he had been promoted to the as a Minister of Higher Education of Gorbachev. So he came back immediately to his old institute to tell the students what had happened. And they were flabbergasted, they were silent, and the teachers were silent because this minister, their former rector, was saying things they would be arrested for a couple of months before. He criticized the Soviet Union that it was failing, it was falling apart and failing on economy and had to be fundamentally changed. And then he made this observation, which was so similar to what Julia said. He said, yeah, you all know that we have these inventions, the patents, they are there in the cupboards. You know where they are. I know where they are because we are all working in this institute to make new inventions, but they are never used. They are never built. The patents are here in our safes. And then he made the second observation. He said, when we are able to build a new factory with new technology, we don't close the old one. The old one, which is superfluous and old-fashioned and bad product, it will just continue because nobody will close it. So that sort of corroborates what you said, that production apparently tended to remain the same for years and not take into account any technological advances. And then you come in actually with the story about the Institute of Aesthetics, when suddenly, so it's how I see it a little bit, how the notion of design comes in, and things start to change a little bit, but not enough, because of course many years later it led to the changes of Gorbachev anyway.
Yeah, that's true. There were a lot of efforts made by designers, but many designs were changed and they were not really produced in a way that designers were planning them, because at the factory there was no paint that was needed, there was no this specific type of wood, or there was no some possibilities to produce what was planned. So there was always like a problem that came in with design and with the production, and these two worlds, they never really match. That's why the designers had to make compromises and compromises and compromises. And when we want to show a project together with the design that actually was produced, some designers saying we don't want that because it has nothing to do with the design we made. So that's some things were produced more or less. The designers fighted till the end, and it was possible to do. Or if directors of the factory or if the ministry were collaborative, then it can happen. But it was more than it was not often that this great result was succeeded. So most of the times, yeah, it was a lot of compromises which were not making the final products look really good. And I want to add one thing, that many factories are still producing the same things that were produced in the Soviet Union, like crystal glass or ceramics, they never changed lines. And if before it was everyone had the same, so now people are buying this because they have nostalgia, because it started to be a tradition.
Moreover, certain designs are revived nowadays to feed this feeling of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And because these are recognizable designs that were in the childhood of I don't know, both my and my parents and probably my grandparents. so that these things that are around for such a long time really become culturally significant in a very strange way. But also, I wanted to make a few other points about this film. This feeling of nostalgia, if we look at this film today, doesn't only include this nostalgia on the Soviet Union, but also this film was done in a pre-digital era, and a lot of problems that the characters experience and that actually the film is built on are because of there's no equipment that we have today. For example, this man is calling his fiancée from Petersburg to Moscow, and he cannot just call, he has to place an order, and the telephone station has to call him back, and he has to wait for this call in the apartment. So there's a lot of fuss and kind of hardship around this lack of digital technology, which is unimaginable nowadays. And for example, he's being sent on a plane instead of his friend, which nowadays it's also impossible to be sent somewhere on the plane instead of someone else. And we can see how life really changed on one hand. And it also changed not only you know, physically, so to speak, but also cultural in terms of certain behavioral strategies. I watched this film many times, and certain things never occurred to me, but I was watching it again for you know, before our presentation from a little bit of different perspective, and there is a lot of questions that I have. For example, when this woman finds a strange man in her apartment, it doesn't even occur to her to call the police. Nowadays, it's automatic gesture. You just take the phone and call the police without even questioning it. To her, she pours water onto him so he would wake up. Does lots of things, pushes him, but it doesn't even occur to her to that she can call someone to help. And probably it was because of the Soviet people's caution in involving the police and the people of you know, whatever powers there may be, because it was a difficult relation. Maybe because it was different times, and people were probably less. I don't know. The people felt danger in one things and didn't feel danger in the other things. So this is an interesting perspective, and I was wondering if you have any comments.
Maybe people were just feeling more secure because there was everything was more controlled. What is your opinion, Thymen?
Well, perhaps it was also actually an interesting adventure. Why would you immediately want to stop it? If everything is the same and dreary, you know, when something really doesn't fit in, then, you know, in my impression, Russians are quite inquisitive people. They're always interesting to see what is it, what happened, They are very open to speak with you as a foreigner or things like that. So I think that she was actually intrigued, even though it was unpleasant that there was a drunk man and she didn't want it. But, you know, at last something happened in her life. Isn't that so?
But also this guy was sure that he is in his own apartment because he knows where everything is situated, and he was saying that she should go away because that's his home.
Yeah, well, that's the humor. You get something which is not, you know, two worlds which collide, and they both have their logic, but they don't, you know, fit together. That gives the feeling of humor, I think. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful film in that sense. Maybe one step further, what came up in my mind when you say this and refer to the film is what was actually the outlook of people at the time. I cannot really answer that question, so I put it more to you. If everything was so much the same, then the lives were also very traditional for most people. And I remember that at the time, people told me that when they finished their university or other education, they were not free to choose their job. They would get an allocation, a job allocated by the state. Well, this was really something weird to me. But the other thing that they were looking for or wishing was to get married, to have children, and in material ambitions, it was a car and a flat. That was more or less was it. Or am I mistaken? What was the actually? What did young people at the time expect from life?
You're right, Tim. It was more or less a country house, so-called dacha.
Yeah.
An apartment that can be given by the government as a flat from your organization, or it can be built with your with the part money given from the organization, partly from yourself, which was called it was called Julia, how it was called this cooperative flats. And these were the only two ways to receive, but the one family couldn't have 2 flats or 3 flats. It could be only one. And then also everyone had to be in line, and sometimes in line for 2-3 years to get furniture, for example, or a car. So people were getting into this line, and slowly through the years, their place in line was changing, and it was and then when they were getting a car, then they should have it for almost the whole life. People were not able to really change things. There was no consumerism in the Soviet Union because there were no things. And if you would get a vacuum cleaner, or you would get a car or a set of furniture, then you should be very careful with those things, because this will last forever, because this was maybe the first and the last time in your life that you would get that. And this was, of course, like the maximum that you can reach. Of course, maybe if you're a diplomat, you can travel also abroad, but this was a very few people.
Now, what does it say about the ambition of people or their
ambition of people?
Initiative.
Ambition were more in work, in everyone was reading a lot, and everyone was traveling through the Soviet Union, and there was enthusiasm that if you will come as a young scientist to the institute, you will open, I don't know, a new theory, or you will make a new medicine. People were more thinking what they can do for their country. That was their ambitions. Not the material ambitions, but more in education, more in well-being of everyone else. For the common good.
The contribution into humanity through your work, through your inspirations, and usually that was all done in pure enthusiasm without any expectation of material reward. So this was completely different mindset. And there are always pluses and minuses because, you know, of course, there is a big minus to that, but also there was a plus because people were really investing themselves, you know, for the sake of it. So that it was a different system, and yes, of course, there was a lot of majority of things were of course quite difficult, but I think that it was not as black and white, and there were certain very interesting parameters that were quite different from Western way of life. And I think it would be interesting for me to offer this film to our audience and to see how it is perceived from this day and this time. And I actually would like to open the floor to questions if we have any from our audience so far, before in anticipation of the film. I would be also very curious to hear people's reaction after they see the film, and a welcome question to which I will try to respond. And the question that we have now is that if this movie is in any way similar to Groundhog Day, where every day is the same, and also the question is whether this screening is inspired by a pandemic, where we feel that every day is the same. But you see, I think that film is not really resembles the Groundhog Day, because it's not about the day being the same. It's the things that are being the same around people, but the events are actually quite magical and quite extraordinary, and the circumstances and how they develop is really out of ordinary. And this is interesting question, how you marry this very standard environment with quite unique and individual people and their lives and their fates as play against this background. This is what Thymen, I think, mentioned also. And there was another observation, was a very good observation, that this film is really features people who are in somewhat of the elite, because he is a doctor and she is a teacher, and those were two professions that were most respected in the Soviet Union because they were considered to be most important. And but they are elite. They are really kind of intellectual and cultural elite of the country, and this is probably why this film also sort of aims at this kind of audience, although maybe wider, but it reflects the life of this intellectual and cultural elite, and it also has a lot of puns, a lot of quotes from famous poems that are very skillfully woven into the dialogues. And there are wonderful songs with verses of contemporary poets, sort of leftist poets of the time. So, of course, these features are quite difficult to translate. But for me, who has a little bit of a different perspective, because I was born and raised in the Soviet Union, and I do know these things, I'm really curious how this looks from contemporary times and from you know, people who grew up in a completely different society. So
I think now everyone is already looking forward to see the movie.
yes, so if you would like to comment more on would you like to comment? Do you have any more comments to this film, or Thymen and Sasha? Or if not, we can.
I think it's time to look the movie.
Okay. So we will have another event on December 30, also at 4 o'clock. For people who watched the movie and had questions, we will be happy to address these questions. And I'm really, really curious about the perspectives that people would have on this film. I thank you very much, Sasha and Thymen, for being here with us today. And thank you very much to everybody who came to listen. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everyone. And I hope you have fun watching the film.
Thank you very much, Julia, for inviting.
Thank you very much, and congratulations with your exhibition.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Best
Bye.
wishes. Bye.